First of all, thank you to everybody who's been watching my Revisiting SAFC Managers series. Obviously, it hasn't got the most amount of views in the world, but at least for the people who have watched it, they do seem to have enjoyed it. I hope anyway. So this is a video that's been probably a long time coming, and I'm not going to call this Revisiting SAFC Managers because obviously we're essentially just looking at Parkinson, who's the current manager. Firstly, I just want to give my thoughts on the new kit. I've just literally seen it, the new Nike 2021 home shirt. Actually looks really good. And I'm usually quite a hard person to please for kits. In general, I haven't disliked many Sunderland kits. And there was a couple, I see one person in particular said they thought it looked like a Sunday League top. I can kind of get that, but I think for me, I like the look of it. I think it's just nice to have the traditional stripes in that fashion. I like the collar. I like the sleeves. I'm just a simple person when it comes to kits. I'm fairly hard to please. I usually prefer away kits to home ones because you get a different variety. With home kits with red and white, there's only really so much that you can actually do with them. But nevertheless, it looks pretty good. I'm too much of a cheapskate to buy one, so maybe I'll just get it for Christmas. I don't know. Anyway, the main crux of the video, Phil Parkinson. This is kind of the greyest of grey areas among Sunderland fans at the moment, and believe it, that's actually, I think, a pretty accurate term to describe it. Most people know how they feel about Stuart Donald at this point. Most people know how they feel about Charlie Methvin. I could pretty much gather what most people think of Jim Rodwell, and I've said in the past I think Jim Rodwell's a complete puppet, dangling from the strings of Stuart Donald, and hopefully if this takeover happens, which we don't know about yet, if that happens, the sooner Jim Rodwell's out the door, the better. But Phil Parkinson's a funny one because it's kind of, Phil Parkinson kind of splits opinion among the fan base, I think, at least from what I've seen on social media, and I obviously understand that Twitter and social media isn't reflective of the full fan base. There'll probably be about 3/4 of the fan base, or at least half of them that probably aren't on Twitter. There'll be at least a percentage of them who aren't on social media. But I just kind of want to assess my thoughts on Phil Parkinson. Do I think he should stay, or do I think he should go? I've said in the last couple of videos that I'm Parkinson in, and I'll get to that in a bit. But to kind of start off with, obviously when Jack Ross was sacked in October of last year, Sunderland didn't have a full-on replacement lined up. They didn't have someone who was going to, pretty much come in and succeed him. They didn't have someone who was going to, and bearing in mind at the time, the remit would have been, let's get that extra 10-15% out of the players and get into the top two, which I thought was right. I thought the players we had were good enough. I just didn't think that Jack Ross was getting the best out of them. And also people have said Jack Ross was overachieving. I disagree heavily with that. I think that there was a lot of... You look at Birmingham... It's not Birmingham. You look at Lincoln, obviously the game where he got sacked from. You got Peterborough. You've got Bolton. You got Oxford. There was a number of performances that were... And even Ipswich. There was more handful of bad performances than good ones. And you could say that Jack Ross did fairly well to only lose, 2 games? But really, at the end of the day, the aim should have been, 100 points, ironically. But saying that, though, when Phil Parkinson came in, Phil Parkinson wasn't my first choice. My first choice at the time would have been Daniel Stendel. Phil Parkinson, for me, just wasn't a very inspiring appointment. But then I thought about it and thought, well, actually, he got Bolton promoted under a transfer embargo. And whatever people say about the state of Sunderland at the minute, I'd be hard-pressed to believe that the state of Bolton in the 16-17 season would have been worse than what we have now, and I do believe it would have. I do believe it was worse. And Parkinson managed to get promoted on freebies, which you can do in this league to get out of it. So the first couple of games, we did see an improvement in performance. Even with Wickham, it was semi-functional, even though the result was garbage. Tranmere, obviously, we beat 5-0. Shrewsbury away, which I was at with Paul, Sean, and Dino. We did actually play quite well. We just didn't get the luck we deserved. Then we beat Southend, of course, which obviously we played poorly, but we got a 1-0 win, nevertheless. As far as since then, though, and I'm trying to take cups out of this, since then, that's when this all started to fall apart to some extent, because then we drew with Coventry, lost to Burton and Gillingham, drew with Blackpool, and drew with Bolton. So you're talking 3 points out of a possible 15 there, which isn't good enough for a team that's supposed to be going for the top 2. And, and I know a lot of people, and if you ask this question, should Phil Parkinson stay or should he go? If you'd ask this question probably at the start of 2020, there would have been probably a lot more people saying Parkinson out than Parkinson in anyway. There were a lot of people that probably weren't convinced by that, and I was one of them. After losing at Gillingham, I was just kind of like, nah, Parkinson has to go because, when no manager, in my opinion, should be going to Gillingham, with all due respect to Gillingham, and Gillingham did deserve to beat us probably on the day. Well, I could argue we might have deserved a point. But either way, that's not Gillingham's problem. They got a great result for themselves. But, I would argue for a Sunderland perspective, we should never be going to Gillingham and playing for a point, ever. and we could probably got what we thoroughly deserved just by playing for a draw there. But nevertheless, then, so I was one of them. I was fully convinced Parkinson should go, and I do believe for good reason, because, again, for a team that's supposed to be going for promotion, he took us from something like 6th or 7th to 15th after we drew with home to Bolton on Boxing Day. Then, this is when things started to turn. We then beat Doncaster, Lincoln, Wickham, and MK Dons. I think we ended with like 4 wins in a row. Drew with Donny, beat Tranmere, lost to Pompey, and we followed up with another 4 straight wins, which was Ipswich, Rochdale, Oxford, and Bristol Rovers. Unfortunately, however, that's where the good run stopped, and then we drew against Fleetwood, which in hindsight, it's not the worst of results, although you could argue we're at home. And yeah, we drew against Fleetwood, obviously, on New Year's Day as well. 2 draws against Fleetwood, not the worst of results, but I would be disappointed not to beat them, to be honest. And then you've got losing at Coventry, and then the 2 games that cost Sunderland were drawing at home to Gillingham and losing away to Bristol Rovers. And really, for Sunderland, if you're aiming to get in the top 2, you take 6 points out of those games, or at bare minimum, at very worst 4. And the thing is, Parkinson's run since Christmas has given him cash in the bank with a lot of support. I think with some supporters, it's given him cash in the bank. And obviously the game since, there'll be some people who have got their mind stubbornly made up on Phil Parkinson. I don't blame them for that, because it's very hard to get out of that mindset. I only just recently got out of that mindset and think, right, let's back Parkinson and see what happens. So, for people to say, I've seen a couple of people say you can't really judge him for last season because of what happened with the current global pandemic we're experiencing, and no, I don't believe that. If that were the case, then Coventry, Rotherham and Wickham wouldn't have got promoted. Parkinson's remit, when he came in, was to get Sunderland to the Championship. He failed to do that. But having said that, now I know people are going to say, there's a deja vu here between this and Jack Ross. What's the difference? Well, the difference is Parkinson has done it in this league before. So in theory, Parkinson should know what we need to actually get out of this league. And so far, we've signed Aidan O'Brien and obviously re-signed Bailey Wright. Now, as of right now, we're interested in Luke Garbutt and Scott Fraser. Now, those are 2 players I expect Sunderland should be looking to sign, if not sign. If Parkinson keeps this up, I actually think he will get more support. And I do think that Parkinson, for me, is our best chance of promotion, even with the prospect of Stuart Donald still being at the club. I genuinely believe if Parkinson can be adequately backed in the free agent market and get what he wants, I wouldn't be surprised to see Sunderland keep a number of clean sheets next year, unless Lee Burge suddenly turns garbage, which no in our luck could happen. Hopefully not, though. Hopefully our defence is going to be solid enough. But, I would actually hope that if Parkinson's adequately backed, we could actually do well, and that's the big difference. I could still see Parkinson turning this around and actually getting Sunderland promoted, and that's why I'm not sack Parkinson. Now, obviously, probably about a quarter or a third into the next season, if we're really not doing very well and we're not playing good football, then yes, we should be looking to get rid of Parkinson. Fair enough. But for me, I'm behind Parkinson. I can completely understand why people aren't behind him, because I do believe there's still going to be trepidation there, but I do also believe that Parkinson can turn this around if he wants to, and I do believe he does want to do it, and we've probably got on paper the best person for the job to try and get us up. So I'm behind Parkinson. Whether you are, whether you aren't, is completely fine. It's all about opinions. I'll love you and leave it. So this kind of concludes my SAFC Managers series, but, it's kind of a video in its own right about Phil Parkinson. And obviously, again, home kit looks nice, and hopefully, in the next couple of days, I'll be doing videos saying Sunderland have signed Luke Garbutt or Scott Fraser or something like that. Take care, love you lots, guys, and stay safe.